Hey everyone, welcome to the That's Allowed podcast. I'm your hostess, Audrienne McKeon, and today we have Joel Nest. Joel, please introduce yourself.
Well, thank you, Audrey, for having me on your show. Greatly appreciated. So, as she said, I am Joel Nest. I am a director of operations for a security company currently. I have a lot of side projects, including 2 podcasts of my own. One is related to the security, law enforcement, military, outdoors enthusiasts. It's very I will get to my story. I'm just expressing what I'm doing currently to make it a
Absolutely.
little bit more obvious of why I'm on the show. And we talk about leadership, self-improvement, things of that nature. My other one is debunking conspiracy theories because I'm a conspiracy theory nut. And well, we're living in the world where it's just fun now. So my
Absolutely.
story, my story kind of grew up with kind of the same. It's well, not really the same as everybody else, but I grew up with a single mother. I had a father who wasn't there. He kind of left at a young age, so didn't really have that father connection. My mom taught me a lot, but I kind of learned off my uncles and grandpa and stuff like that. So the male side of me kind of grew up in the woods, just kind of learning how to do all those. I don't really want to call it macho things because it isn't. It's just outdoor living, I guess you would call it more so nowadays.
Survivalist things.
Survivalist type of
Mm-hmm,
things, yeah.
mm-hmm.
So hunting, you're fishing, you're how to light a fire and all that stuff. And then we moved to the city, and then we started. Obviously, my mom wanted to meet somebody, so she branched out, and I had a stepfather, and then brother and sister after that. And then through, I guess, my teenage years, I was very I wasn't really a good kid.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot going on. I think that I was very smart, but at the same time, I just kind of wanted to be something different than I was. So I was in a band. We did a lot of touring. We were really good at what we did. But there was drugs and alcohol and all that stuff that was involved. So that really played a huge part of my life when I was basically from around, I'd say 17, 18 to kind of just before 20, maybe
Mm-hmm.
even a little bit past 20, maybe very shortly past. And then there was a milestone in my life when um, I got to a band practice one day, and we kind of went to the bar every day before, just have a drink and then start practicing. And so I sat down with everybody, and they didn't kind of, at that point, they kicked me out of the band. And I think that was a huge turning point for my life for a lot of reasons. I think trust was a lot involved. I think loyalty. I think there was a lot of things that were going through my head. I was mad. I was happy. Um, I just had to, like, there was so many emotions that I wasn't sure what to actually focus on at that time.
Yeah.
So I remember my mom pulling me aside just after that, because she saw that I wasn't going down a dark path. I was just being somebody. I felt empty of something because I was in a band for so
Mm.
long. I mean, I was a musician since I was 13 years old. So it was kind of all I knew was that camaraderie in a band. And then my mom said, well, maybe you should get away for a little bit and just kind of start a new life. So I went back to the Kootenays, away from the city, which the Kootenays here is like just a rural place, out in the middle of nowhere kind of thing. But uh, I ended up staying with family, ended up getting a job working at a lumber mill, and just kind of resetting what I kind of just my brain, just doing everything, staying off the drugs, alcohol. Well, drank, but who doesn't at that point?
At that point,
And
in this
then
context.
in this context, exactly. And then yeah, and then moving forward, I didn't stay there for very long, but I felt that I was ready to kind of move back, and I felt that I was more grounded in myself. So at this point I was about just over 20, and I came
Can I
back.
interrupt you there for a
Yes,
moment and
absolutely.
ask a question? What was it that happened during that time, or what was it that you did during that time to kind of get back to you?
So again, I love the outdoors. I think that
Yeah.
naturally I am somebody who just kind of needs to be away from society every so often. That's why our family, we're big in the outdoors. We go out, we literally get away from the civilization for a lot of time just to kind of de-stress. And there's nothing better than hearing nothing and just
Mm.
hearing the lakes or the rivers. But I think what happened was I just really focused on myself,
Mhm.
being young, because I was young. I was still very immature. I just needed to kind of get away from the drug scene. I needed to get away from the music. I needed to get away from everything and just restart everything and just
Yeah.
kind of give myself a fresh look at what I wanted to do. The problem was is I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And
Mhm.
for the next year or so after that, I had no idea. Um, so when I came back, I decided that I was going to go into I was going to join the military or law enforcement or do something of that nature. So I went in and doing that. But because I had a history with drugs, they
Mhm.
weren't going to allow me to proceed just at that point. So I kind of said, well, that's not really going to be for me then. I figured then there's got to be another road. So I was working at this time in restaurants and stuff, doing management and helping out just wherever I could, just to, again, find myself, find what I wanted to do. I really liked working in restaurants, but the restaurant, I felt that there was just something a little bit more. So what ended up happening was during this time period, and it's a very short window, but I started this paintball organization with a business partner at the time. And what we did was we sold paintball gear.
Mhm.
But there weren't just any sort of paintball guns. They were the ones that military and law enforcement used for training. So it was a little bit more high end.
Yeah.
And to That's kind of a long story, but to break it down short, one day the government ended up calling me and saying, "Well, sorry, you can't sell those without this certain type of license, which you can't use anymore." And so it basically halted our operations that day.
Yeah.
And I remember calling my ex business partner at the time, or my business partner at the time, but I remember calling him and saying, "Well, if we can't sell this stuff, let's go do it real for real." And so I ended up kind of sitting down with my mom at this time. And like I said, I was very young, didn't really have any
Mhm.
money,
Yeah.
didn't have a lot going on. But I said, I really want to go do this. I found this research of private security contractors, and the private
Mhm.
security contractors did overseas work. They were in Afghanistan and Iraq at the time and stuff like that. So I was really keen on doing that. But here's a young kid that doesn't have any experience, no military, no law enforcement. So I had to really figure out what I was going to do with that. And then I spoke to my mom. My mom thought it was a good idea, and she said she would help me with the training. So basically, a week or two later, I was on a flight to South Africa to start my training for
Wow.
doing military police, or not military policing, but military contracting.
Yeah.
So I spent
So you basically had to
just
teach yourself how to be a soldier.
yeah, but I actually got through the course of my whole career so far. I probably spent under 150,000 on training just to get
Wow.
myself up to where I needed to be, because in this industry you're not really frowned upon, but you don't have the skill set needed to be in this type of role. And so I really needed to push myself farther and faster than everybody else
Mm.
because of the
Mhm.
fact. um, and what happened was, when I was starting to do the training, I was doing one thing that I tell everybody to do, whether you are ex law enforcement or not, and that's network. Networking is the biggest thing anybody can do. It doesn't matter if you're a construction worker. It doesn't matter what you do. If you sell books, it's still networking. Networking at the end of the day is going to provide you with the tools you need to get where you need to go.
Yeah.
You can take as much training as you want. That's fine. But if you don't know anybody, that training's useless. So I just networked as much as possible, and I finally found a place that was going to train me up to the standards that I needed to, that was creditable. So, or credited, credible. I don't think credible is a word, but credited. And once I was finished with that, then I was lucky enough to have some people kind of pull me into their wings, or under their wings, and they kind of gave me very light tasks to do, more so administration work than it was security work,
Sure.
which was kind of the start of my administration side of what I do now, which really helped me when I was younger, because I was learning how the back end of these security companies run.
Mhm.
And that just escalated me through the networks, and it really helped me to better get myself to where I needed to be so that I could actually do my job. And even though we were in hostile situations, you still needed to know how to do all the older stuff. So I ended up actually starting in Africa. I worked a lot in very, very remote areas,
Mm-hmm.
places that you sometimes can't get to with a vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
But we did work for NGOs and big corporations, mostly oil and gas and stuff like that. And what I learned a lot while working there was a lot of like, the thing is when I went back to the Kootenays and kind of restarted myself, I think that was one of many that I needed to go through to really kind of turn that brain on to where I felt that I have become who I wanted to be. And seeing those situations that I was in, especially the poverty side of it, really
Yeah.
kind of opened my eyes a lot more. So that was the point where I felt a lot more comfortable being there than I did being back in the city at home. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I love my country. I love being here, but at that point, it was just a lot more eye opening to see. And there's a story that I do tell a lot of people. When I came back, actually, I would come back and forth quite a bit, but when people would complain about cell phone bills or something like that, I kind of always, even nowadays, I kind of like, well, what's the point? Like, the reason is because when I was over there, there was a lot of, like I said, poverty stricken areas that we were in. And one situation that really sticks to me, and there's much worse that I've seen, but the one that really stuck with me was there was a young boy. He was like African boy, and he was just wearing underwear, and he was walking outside of his little shack. And the shacks that they have are these like these tin kind of just tin houses. They're
Yeah.
probably no bigger than a maybe 6 feet by 6 feet, like, and it houses the entire family.
Mm-hmm.
And the poor boy comes out, and he doesn't even come out of a door. It's like a curtain that he pulls aside. He's got a cup in his hand. It's a white cup, and it's like a coffee mug, but it's not like a coffee mug that you would have. It's like a tin one, like one of those like metal ones.
Yeah.
And he walks over to this stream that's literally like right in front of him. And there's pop bottles in it. There's trash. I mean, there's got to be like 3 inches of mud and maybe half an inch of water at the top, right? And he goes down and he just kind of puts his cup in and he starts drinking it, and just like out of like it was like nothing to him, like that was the fact of him getting water.
Yeah.
And I remember just watching this, and I'm just like, oh, like all the stuff that I complain about in my life, and here's this little boy that is literally scrounging for a cup of water through a cesspool. Like, you couldn't pay me enough money to drink out of that, and here
Yeah.
he's doing it every day. And things like that kind of just, they didn't really get to me, but they definitely opened my eyes a lot more to the world around me, rather than more appreciate what I do have. The fact that I do have a cell phone, the fact that I am able to just kind of go out and go to the pool at the down by City Hall or something like that. Like, just those little things that we take for granted really really express myself when I was over there. And it's not really funny, but it's very heartening to see that they don't, not that they don't know about it, because I'm sure if they knew about a TV they would love it, but that they're happy just the way they are. And when Westerners come and they involve themselves into that culture, they
Mm-hmm.
really don't realize that you're not helping, you're more hindering. It's best to just leave them alone and let them live their life the way they want to be. I'm sure there's a lot that would like medicine, and there would like other amenities that Westerners or anybody has, but what they don't know doesn't harm them, because they don't know any better. They don't know that there's TV with cable. They don't know that cell phones have video games on them. They don't know all this stuff. So um, it was just kind of it was just hard to take on some points, because it was overwhelming, and I was very new to it. And being a Westerner, especially a young guy that didn't know any better. I mean, 5 years ago, he was playing on front of the stage and doing drugs. It didn't
Yeah.
matter to me, but now everything did matter at that point.
Yeah. When I was so I lived in West Africa. And when I was there, what I discovered is that the well-meaning white people very often made things worse.
Yeah,
And I think the reason is that, we come in with our sort of cultural ideas of what people might want. And the bottom line is, it's great to offer people resources and then let them do whatever they want with those
absolutely.
resources. It's not so great when you come in and say, okay, here are these resources and you have to use them for this and you have to use it like this, because that's very patronizing and it really doesn't give them that sense of autonomy over their own lives.
I agree. I
Yeah,
I agree 100%.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, my question to you is, what was it about security? That word keeps coming up. What is it about security that really drew you or draws
It's
you?
it's so funny because, like, had I had not kind of gotten into the profession. So the funny thing is the way my personality kind of runs is I don't. This is gonna make me sound a really horrible person, but I'm not really a person to care about everything and others.
Hmm.
Like for example, if I'm walking down and I'm going to see if I see a car accident, then I'll stop for sure. But if I see an argument between two people, it's not my concern and I'll keep on walking. There are certain aspects of what happens day to day where I will intervene, but then my brain races and I'll be like, okay, well, what is the outcome of this? Am I going to take sides on both these people's story? Am I
Right.
going to like the and when I was younger, I used to have that same kind of idea, but I never
Mhm.
knew that there was a profession for that, right?
Right.
And but when I'm working for a said client, and that client is giving me my direction on what I'm supposed to be doing. And when I worked in Africa and you lived there, I'm sure you heard many times that the security forces, they were very one-sided in all the in every job that they were doing.
Yeah.
And what I try to do is I try to tell people, look, you have to understand it from the point of view of the security officer, because it's no different than you going to work. You're not going to go and do something that your competitor would want, or you're not going to do something that you shouldn't be doing under your policies and procedures for your company. And security is just a little bit harder to analyze because you're dealing with people's security, and I get that, I totally do. But at the end of the day, it's we're still out there to do a job nonetheless, and that job, unfortunately or fortunately, is in direct relation to the client, not in everybody's best interest, which is true. I'm not saying anything that people don't know. But when I was growing up, I didn't really know that there was something out there, because I knew there was the military, I knew there was law enforcement, but I had a real problem with somebody telling me, "Hey, I need you to go do this right now. Like, this is your job. Like, this is what you're trained to do," and then being committed to that. Like, when you're joining the law enforcement or military, you're committed to being with them forever. I,
Hmm.
I'm well, not anymore, but I'm salary now. But when I was working, I was contract. So if I wasn't happy about something or the way something was going, I'm out. Like, I
Right.
had that option to decide. And security companies or even organizations aren't as bad as people make them out to be in the movies and stuff. We do have a lot of leeway on what we can and can't do, and we have a lot of rules that govern us to what we can and can't do. The Geneva Convention is one of them, even though I know some people that know what the Geneva Convention are rolling their eyes right now at my comment. But realistically, we still have rules and regulations that we need to adhere by, and we also do have morals that we are grounded by as well.
What would
So,
you say is your moral code?
oh, that one's thin. No, my moral code, it usually stands for what I believe is right. And I know that's a very vague answer, but my moral code is basically to help others that actually need it. And I use the word actually because there's a lot of people that request help but don't need it. There's a lot of people that request help that shouldn't get it because they are in the moral wrong.
Hmm.
There's a lot of people that don't receive help that need it. So you really have to analyze every single situation and understand what you're getting yourself into prior to actually engaging in the action of whatever it is, because you don't want to also be wrong when somebody's trying to do harm on somebody else, or you don't want to be right when somebody does need help and you're not able to help them. So
Is there anything that has happened while you were working that if you kind of I don't want to say regret, but is there anything that you would have done differently
I would say
looking
regret.
back? Fair enough.
100%. um I can't talk about specifics, but
Yeah.
I'll kind of make the scenarios a little bit vague.
Perfect.
There were incidents where we are going from one area to another area to do patrols, or not
Hmm.
necessarily patrols, but we're doing convoy work, which means convoy is when you have vehicles that are lined up, for your listeners that don't know. Vehicles lined up, and you usually have a principal, which is your client, in one of the vehicles, and the rest of the security team is with in the other vehicles, and also with the principal. So as we're going down, this woman that I remember seeing, as she was, again, it was in Africa, but it was just off the side, and I think, not that this makes it any better or worse, but I think they won a football game or something, or as we call it, soccer,
Sure.
and everybody was drinking and everybody was all riled up, and
Yeah.
we were going by, and I pardon, this is not going to be PG, and I'll keep it as PG as possible, but she
That's
was
okay. You
she was
just
off to the
tell it
side,
like it
and she
is.
was well, she was being raped, for a better
Hmm.
choice of words, by
Hmm.
a lot of individuals. We could have stopped, but unfortunately our job is not to stop, our job is to
Right.
continue on. And I remember that very vividly, because I know inside my head, I'm like, we have to stop, we have to stop. But we're in an area where if we stop, we're all, the worst thing could happen.
Yeah.
So I knew that, but that's something that I have to live with for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And there's situations that when we were dealing with a couple places in north Rwanda and stuff like that, where children were becoming very, very hurt. Again, I'm not going to go into specifics, because those are things that I have
Yeah.
to deal with every day, and I don't
Of
need
course.
everybody else to think about them. But that to me is something that I have to live with every day, and it's hard, because we may or may not have been able to save him, but at least we could have tried. And at the end of the day, it sucks. It's one of those things that keeps you up at night some days. And
Yeah.
we talk about, on my show, we talk a lot about PTSD and stuff,
Hmm.
and it's a real thing. I don't suffer from it as much as others do, so I don't even put I can't even imagine what the worst case scenario is, so I don't pretend that I have it worse than anybody else. But some nights it is pretty hard, because you're trying to, I have no problem going to sleep, but in the middle of the night, all of a sudden something will happen, and I'll think about it. And there's that incident. There's probably 150 more of them. Like, it was
Yeah.
never one thing, but when I tell people it's hard, because they assume, how do I say this? They come from a different mindset than what was happening there and then.
Yes.
And if I tell somebody something about, like, a father being murdered in front of their family, they don't get it. Like, they think, oh, well, you could have done something, or you could have not really intervened. But you also have to understand that when you're in that type of situation, there's a lot happening, and it's not just the person that's being physically hurt
That's right.
or whatever it is. It's your life, it's the life of the other children that are around you, it's the life
Hmm.
of your client, it's the life of the mothers that are hiding in their houses. Like, there's, if you intervene, it could be not just one life, but many. And I
Yeah.
just try to explain that. But because nobody has really been in that type of situation, they don't really understand past the point of, well, you should have helped them. Right.
Right.
So I don't really talk about a lot. The people that I do talk about it, or other people that I worked with, or people that I know have gone down the same road, or people who have lived in this situations where they understand a little bit more.
Yeah.
So,
And also, it is a very different cultural context, and it's so hard to explain that to people who
yeah.
haven't been in that situation. I when I was living in West Africa, something happened where the best friend of the guy who I was seeing hit his wife with a brick, just threw a brick at her face.
Yep.
And I, of course, immediately, go to her aid. I'm yelling at him, like, how could you do this? What's wrong with you? And he says to me, you don't understand. If I don't do that, everyone in the neighborhood will think I don't care about her anymore, that I've given up on her. And she will be basically free game for
Yep.
every guy in this neighborhood to
Yep.
attack. So I'm like, well, that's some bullshit. And so I'm, again, trying to comfort her. And she's like, no, 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 he's right. He has to do this so that people know he still loves me. Which, like, the
Yeah.
layers of crazy, it's hard to unpack, but at the same time, that is their reality that they live every day. And for me to come in and say, well, that's wrong, or that's incorrect, or that's, morally bad, is just my opinion to
Yep.
them. It doesn't matter what I think to them.
No, and that's exactly it. It really doesn't matter what you think,
Yeah.
and it's not. It's very unfortunate, but when we as Westerners are like, well, why did somebody who is gay get thrown off a building?
Right.
Because that's what they do over there.
Yeah.
But that's wrong. You better believe it's wrong on so many levels. Like, you have no idea how frustrated or angry I am and how I'm tensing up just even talking about it.
Right.
But it's not my world.
Well, and also there's so much wrong with our world that they see that we're
Yeah.
completely used to and inured to,
Yeah.
And I remember talking to somebody about, I'd gone to visit my aunt, and she didn't have any room for me. And so I had to go and stay in a hotel. And they were like, wait, I'm sorry. Your aunt, your actual aunt, like, she's a family member? She's like a blood relative? And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah. And they're like, so you went to her house and she wouldn't let you stay there? And it just blew their minds. The
Yeah.
kind of hospitality that they are used to and think is
Yep.
normal is just very different from what we do here. And so they were just horrified. They thought she was such a terrible person, and like, how could you even speak to her anymore? And I'm like,
I
that's so
that's
normal
so
for
true.
us.
That's so
Yeah.
funny and so true, because it's,
Yeah.
to them, they would have built you a new house.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They would, I love to tell this. This is a little anecdote about African life that tells you so much about Africans. Every night after they're done eating, they don't eat everything. They keep a little bit of the food, no matter how hungry they are. They keep a
Yeah.
little bit of the food aside and they cover it just in case somebody shows up in the middle of the night and is
Yeah.
hungry. That
Yep.
tells you so much about African,
Yeah.
the African mentality.
It's so weird because they're the most gentle, but yet can be the most aggressive.
Yeah.
And it's just, I
Well,
guess so are we. So it doesn't really
exactly.
matter. So
Every
it's,
culture
yeah.
has good and bad. Everywhere you go, there are people, I won't say good and bad people, because honestly, everybody's good and bad.
Yeah. Oh, I
There
agree 100% with that. Yeah. Yeah.
I think, everywhere you go, you find people who will do things that will horrify you and people who will do things that will amaze and, put you in awe.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I agree.
humans, man.
Yeah, I know. Uh,
So
yeah.
the next question I have is, how did those experiences change you?
So a lot of drama. Probably should have saw a psychiatrist of some kind, but I didn't. Um, I think I have the ability to decompress issues myself.
Mhm.
I think every time I'd come home, I just kind of reset, and then I
Yeah.
would just go back to work, because like it was constantly flying home, flying back, doing something else, or else working remotely anyway. But for the most part, I'm really good at talking myself out of things and into things. Like, I'm very good
Yeah.
at just kind of analyzing how I feel about certain things. And that's why I said that I don't really care, because I use that model a lot when I'm trying to, first I analyze something and I'm like, okay, I don't care about it. And my wife, she used to give me shit about it. Sorry, pardon me. Sorry, my
No,
friend.
you're fine.
She used to give me she used to get mad at me, not really mad at me, but she's like, how do you not care about that? And I go, well, first of all, there's a lot of things I've done in the past where I if I cared about them, I just go insane. But through day-to-day life, I just kind of work my brain on two factors: either A, I care, or I don't care. And if I don't care, it somehow rationalizes my thought to not have this emotional baggage attached to it.
Right.
For example, if there were situations growing up, not really growing up, but after I started doing contract work, if there were situations where um, I'd be dumped by a girlfriend or something like that, or we would break up or something. And usually when I was younger, maybe I'd go through like a day or so of anxiety over it. And, well, nowadays you can go on their Facebook and check what they're doing. But I got to a point where I just didn't care. It was just
Yeah.
like, oh well, moving on. Now I would care. There would be an emotional spurt of like 10, 15 minutes where I'd be like, oh, this is not good, or whatever the situation was. But then I just started putting in that not caring attitude, and it really, really, really does help. Now, obviously, if something really bad happens, that's a different emotional baggage that I'm not going to say I don't care about. If something
Right.
happens to my children or my wife or a close friend or family member or something, then obviously I want to put emotions to that. But how do I structure how much emotions I'm going to put to it so that I don't ruin my own mental stability, and I keep myself going for the benefit of others. And this goes back to the security thing. When somebody is injured or there's something wrong, you still have to worry about everybody else.
Yeah.
And in our a prime example, and I'm not putting, well, if you have a mother and she has 4 children, and one of her children is sick. We don't need to go to extremes here, but if one of her children is sick, she still has 3 other children to worry about. And there's an analogy that I actually use for my life that I don't really know if I've created it. Probably not. Somebody else has probably said it, but I say it a lot, and I'm going to say that I coined it. But it's always like, when you're on a plane, you're going onto the tarmac and you're about to hit the runway, and they talk about how to properly put your seatbelt on and everything else. But then they also tell you that if the oxygen pressure in the plane lowers, the masks are going to come down. They always tell you put the mask on yourself first before you apply the mask to anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how my life works. I apply the mask to myself first before I help anybody else, because if I can't help people, which also includes mental health, if I
Yeah.
can't help people, then nobody's going to get any help from me. Um, I've been down the road where I've just been so gone from reality that I know what that outcome is and how it will damage other people. So nowadays, like I said, I have that nonchalant kind of I don't care attitude for a lot of things, just because I have so many people that I need to help day to day that I can't focus on one thing. Now my children are my world. They always get first dibs at everything for me.
Mm-hmm.
They're always the ones that get it first, but I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the rest of everybody else.
Yeah.
So I've just kind of taught myself how to do that. And I think I'm really good at doing that. It's just unfortunate because I do get those type of added. Well, Joel doesn't care. Like, especially with people that work for us. Oh, well, Joel doesn't give a shit. You're right. I don't, but it's not because I don't care about you or your family or how you're raising your kids or what the roof over your head is. It's just that your concern is on a scale right now for me, and everybody else's concern, which we have hundreds and hundreds of people that need my attention at any given moment, yours is going to be somewhere on those levels. So I'm going to address it when I can address it, but it's not going to emotionally affect me. And that's just how I've kind of developed myself.
So do you feel like you sort of compartmentalize? Is Would that be a
I
way of saying
see.
it?
I would say yes, but the compartment's very short when it goes into storage. Like
Mm,
it's like all of a sudden I'll deal with whatever the situation is that will bring me back to reality, or just uh, with the lack of emotion on it. But once it's done and over with, it's done and over with. To me, I don't hold and I don't really hold a grudge on anybody. I don't have the patience for drama. That's kind of the way I work around people.
yeah.
Is once you have that, like I said, that threshold of drama, I'm out.
Mhm.
I'll literally just say, I'm done. And I'll turn around and walk away because that level of drama is not going to affect my life.
Mm.
So when I talk to people and like you were saying, like, how do I, how do I put it into resources where if I have something that is bugging me, I'll deal with it right away, which I always do. But then 5, 10 minutes later, I've kind of forgotten about it. Not really forgotten about it because you always remember it, but it's not an issue to me anymore. And I'll just move on.
So you don't feel like there's, like a box of emotions hiding under
No.
your bed somewhere that's gonna jump
Oh no. Okay.
out?
So obviously there's issues like obviously father issues and stuff like that
Sure.
that happened to me when I was younger that obviously are things that I still I don't really say I would say I still hold emotional baggage with for sure 100%. There's probably even relationships that if I think about it long enough will start to bug me, but and that means friends and obviously girlfriends and stuff like that, and even family members. But I think for the most part I used to do that. I used to dwell on things, but then it just I just started adapting to this style where if I know I'm going to dwell on it, the more mental strain it's going to put on myself.
Mhm.
And then that means that I'm going to be bitter. I'm going to be short tempered. I'm not going to feel like I'm going to have less room to love because I'm just too much baggage in my life for, and I don't want to affect my family. That
Right.
is usually the end outcome. We're all allowed to be mad. We're all allowed to have feelings. There's no problem with that. But in our household, we try to limit the amount of frustration that you have on somebody else because
Mm.
it's just not gonna it's not healthy for everybody.
Right.
Um, my kids are allowed to be mad at me. That's totally fine. Be mad at me. I did something wrong too. It works both ways.
Yeah.
So just understand and work through it, and then hopefully you can come to a better resolution.
Well, it sounds like you really take your responsibility, your personal responsibility
Yeah,
around your emotions very seriously. And I
I
think
do.
you have to, when you're in a situation like that, because your emotions could literally get someone killed, like
A-
you
a-
or someone else that
Absolutely.
you're responsible for.
Absolutely. And I learned that very young in my career that there are certain situations where, like you said, the emotions just you can have an emotion to a certain extent, but your logic and your thought process for the mission needs to stay on the mission.
Mhm.
Because if you veer from it, like some of the stories that I did tell, it will get somebody else hurt. But also too is the things that happen to you during the day may not be one or two or three.
Yeah.
It just may snowball. And if you're sitting there crying in the corner about everything that happened, well, then you're useless to everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that I try to do that nowadays where because there's so much that goes on and granted nowadays I'm not at that level of risk that I was when I was a little bit younger.
Mhm.
Um, there's still a lot that happens in 24 hours that I need to address and make sure that people are still safe because there are still people that work for us that put themselves at risk every day.
Yeah.
And we got to make sure that they're okay. So again, it's no longer about me, it's about them. And again, like I said about that scale where I have to worry about certain people at certain times, I can't be worrying about myself and worrying about my mental state when I have to be focused. Which brings me on to another point is why currently, well, I shouldn't say currently, I stopped drinking about 5, 6 years ago. So
Mhm.
I don't drink, but that was because I was finding myself to be I wasn't thinking straight, and I was
Mhm.
finding the alcohol was doing that. Even though I wasn't drinking a lot, I still just kind of shut down alcohol. So currently, obviously, no drugs, no alcohol, but I find myself a lot more focused on what I have to do, especially with my family. But I find that job wise, it's a lot more helping because I don't go to something as a relief.
Right.
So some people will say, oh, at the end of the day, I can't wait for a beer. To me, that process of thinking shouldn't be a process of thinking. It should just be like, okay, I have some other task that's going to come up within 5 or 10 minutes because I just get sporadic tasks. Um, so I have to deal with it and I have to be in the right mindset to deal with it. if I have a couple beers, I may not have thought clearly enough. And so I do that. And then I also think about, obviously, if anything happened to my kids, if they were in the pool and something happened and I have to drive them to emergency and I've been drinking. So I just, I just kind of canceled all the alcohol just so that I can have a fresh head if anything was to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And so who do you think needs to hear this story?
Um, there's probably a lot of people that probably needs to hear it. There's I don't really talk about it a lot, and I think I just don't talk about it a lot because I, like I just expressed, I kind of just put it off to the side. And that, I know people say, well, you're taking your emotions and you're stuffing them down to your feet, but I'm not, because I don't think about them as regularly, I guess, as people think that they do.
Mhm.
I may just think about it like now, like we're talking about it, and then the few times that I may wake up at night, but that, it can't really be controlled. That's not something that ruins my life. It just wakes me up, and I just have to calm myself down and go back to sleep. As I said, I don't have as high issues with mental health that other people do, so
Right.
it's not a concern to me. And I don't take any sleeping medications and stuff like
Well,
that.
here's what
So
I find interesting. I think, the issue with emotion is not the emotion. The issue with the emotion is the negative emotion we have about the emotion. Does that
right,
make sense? So just
yes,
having an emotion is just like, okay, there it is. And then you
yeah,
can let it go and move on. But when you start to spiral because you're like, I shouldn't be feeling this way. Why am I feeling this way? That's what kind of drags you down into this, a difficult to get out of spiral situation.
100%. And people talk to me because, like I said, my show is a lot about PTSD and depression and anxiety and
Sure.
stuff. And they talk about, well, oh, this anxiety is just getting to me. And my my wife, she gets a lot of anxiety.
Mhm.
Um, but I I just tell them straight up. I go, I'm sorry, I don't understand. I really don't. Like, from my perspective, I can't help you. I can listen to your story for sure, and I can listen to what's happening, but I don't have the same emotional, like, connection that somebody else does. When they have high anxiety, they'll say, "Oh, I cut this person off and I couldn't deal with it, and it's just, my heart was racing and I was sweating." And to me, if I cut somebody off, I'd probably just, like, sorry, and just keep moving on. Like, I don't I don't have that anxiety, so I don't I don't give people advice when it comes to stuff like that. I will be the
Sure.
person that listens to them 100%, but I can't give them
Well,
any advice because it's not my place to do it.
well, I think we all have different gifts. And one of your gifts is this ability to kind of just let it go, and move on. And you don't have that strong physical response to uncertainty that other people
Yeah.
do, where they get anxiety and they get depression and things like this. And so that allows you to do things that other people just would be physically incapable of doing. I could never do what you do because I'm just way too empathic. I get around other people's energy and it just
Yeah.
affects me,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
and that can be great when I'm,
Absolutely.
helping someone unpack their story and unpack the emotions and
Yep.
like feeling is healing and let's get into this. But at the same time, I would be totally useless in an emergency situation. And
Right.
so that's why, we have all these different people with different gifts because the world needs all of us. And so, there's nothing to apologize for that, like, I'm sorry, I can't understand what you're going
Yeah.
through. It just, that's your gift, is to
Yeah.
be able to go through those things and then still live a normal life. Like, that's remarkable.
Well, when I was younger, I used to this I used to have, all my girlfriends would call me, girls that are friends would
Hmm.
call me, and they would just unload everything on me. And I
Right.
would always be that guy that would listen and chat with them, and not the friend zone one, but I'm just saying,
Right.
I'd be the one that would definitely talk to them about all their issues. And I used to carry that with me.
Yeah.
I would be, like, in school and I'd be doing something and be like, "Oh, yeah, that's not good. Maybe she should do this." And then I'd go, like, talk to them about, and I was like, I'm investing a lot of time in other people's stuff. Like, and I'm not really investing a lot in my own.
Mm.
And as I got older, like nowadays, like, I do talk to a lot of people, not just because my podcast, but because I do interact with a lot of people. But there's a limit to how much I retain and how much information. Like I'll be blatantly honest with somebody and say, okay, that's it. Pump the brakes. We're
Yeah.
good. Like that's enough
It's
for
good
me.
to have
And
boundaries, you know?
and yeah. And I think everybody kind of does need to have that. I've done it with family before too. When family's talking about another family member, I'm like, whoa, stop. Not my place. Like, and just kind of, I know it may seem rude from the other perspective, but to me, I think that embarking too much information onto somebody else may also be rude in a way, because now you're putting your stress and if somebody cannot handle it, you're putting
Yeah,
your stress onto them.
it's
Not
true.
everybody can handle it the same way. Some people
Yeah,
do dwell on other people's stress, and that's not healthy for them.
right. That's very true. I think it's really important to have good boundaries. And that is what makes you a safe person for people to
Right.
come to with these things, because they
Absolutely.
know you can
Absolutely.
handle it. And at the moment that you can't, you'll say, I'm done. That's it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that makes people feel really safe. So that's
And I
great.
know a lot of secrets, and people know that
Exactly.
I'll keep the
That
secrets.
you'll be the vaults. Exactly. So, what do you think is the main message here? What do you want people to walk away with? What's the takeaway?
um I think a takeaway is just really work on yourself. Um, Understand who you are. Understand that you can do things that other people will judge you for, and to not be so concerned about their judgmental thoughts or actions towards you. You are a human, you make mistakes. And for every mistake you make, you probably make 100 that are correct, but everybody just dwells on the mistakes. I think that you have the right to, like I said in the story, put your mask on before others, even if it is your children, because your mental health does matter a lot. And if you're not capable of helping somebody, then you're useless to everybody.
Yeah.
If I'm in a car wreck, I don't need anybody coming to help me unless you're a doctor. Everybody else can just go away, because as far as I'm concerned, if you don't know how to handle the situation, you shouldn't be here. You're just another you're just another person that it becomes a liability.
Yeah.
So I think that would be my kind of takeaway to everybody. Be yourself, and respect your own feelings, and work on yourself too.
Absolutely. All right. Is there anything else you want the audience to know before we wrap up?
No, I think we're good.
Is
I'm
there,
I'm happy
can
with.
you let them know where they can find you and your podcasts?
Absolutely. So I have two podcasts. One is called Ruck Podcast. That's RUCKUP podcast. It is again geared towards military law enforcement. We're on every social media platform. We're on all the podcasting platforms as well. We actually just released an app, so that's exciting. And then our other one is called Debunking Conspiracy Theories.
Mhm.
I'm a kind of a conspiracy theory nut, but because I've worked for the government, I'm kind of on the other side, and sometimes I understand why they hide secrets. But at the same time, I love UFOs, I love aliens, I love ghosts, I love all that stuff. I love all the paranormal stuff. So I find them as stories, and then I try to understand where they're coming from. So Debunking Conspiracy Theories is the show. Again, you can find it on all your social media platforms and on all of your podcasting platforms.
So I'll just ask
So
you one more thing. So
yes.
what's your favorite conspiracy? Like, what do you think is probably true?
Oh, geez. Oh, there's a lot that I think that are probably true. um, it's funny because when I was younger, I used to listen like Coast to Coast and all those, and I used to just wrap my head around. I was the biggest tinfoil hat wearer that you would ever
Mm.
meet. I just loved them. But there's a lot that I wish that were true. The main one that I do wish was true that I'm really not on the fence with anymore is aliens. That's a big one for me. I would love for it to happen, but for some reason, that and Bigfoot, I guess. If you want to talk about the big ones, those are the big ones. I don't really want to
Mhm.
go into the government conspiracies that we have now with all the stuff that's
Right.
happening. That's for another day, another time.
Indeed.
But those are the two for sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for
Really
having me on.
appreciate your
It was an
time.
honor. Thank you.
Yeah. Take care.
Take care. Bye bye.